Oh, Captain, my Captain. This is Club Fantasy's DFS Showdown preview video. We're going to be looking at the Cincinnati Bengals versus the Baltimore Ravens, Week 10, Thursday Night Football. My man, Austin Amandolia, is going to break down the slate and tell you who you need to be fitting in your Showdown lineups. So stay tuned. Welcome to Oh Captain, My Captain here on Club Fantasy FFL. I am your host, Joshua Hudson. You can find me on the socials at the one Hudsonian. That's the number one. And of course, our DFS expert here at Club Fantasy, Austin Amandolia at Austin_FFL. Austin, how are we doing today, my man?
Doing good. We're a little bit off schedule, but glad we're able to get this in, and we're gonna break down. I'm excited for this game actually, which is a shocker.
I was going to say, this has all the makings of Rams versus Chiefs from like 3 or 4 years ago when it was like 51-48 or whatever it was on a Thursday night. This is the highest over-under on the Week 10 slate. So the fact that it comes on a Thursday night just tells me it's going to be 13-10. So
oh, yeah. I'm definitely betting the under. And we'll talk about that in a minute.
But before we get into all the great picks, Austin, remind everybody how they can play this Thursday night DFS Showdown slate against us here at Club Fantasy.
Yeah, we have a league on DraftKings. It is Club Fantasy FFL. It's our name. It's on DraftKings. There's a link in the show description where you can join. We run a contest every Thursday night. It's a $2 contest, 12-person entry, so it's small. You only have to beat 11 people to win the whole dang thing, and you'll multiply your money by 5 times. It's pretty cool if it fills up. So encourage your friends to fill it up so then you can take their money. But it's a fun way to get some practice out there and to try out some new lineups before you jump into the deep end with some of the bigger contests out there. And it's just a fun way to hang out with us.
Yeah, the link to these contests are in the descriptions, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcast network. So, and friendly reminder, our sister site, Women in Fantasy Football, has a great partnership with Trophy Smack. Go check out all the cool things over at trophysmack.com/WOFF and show that you too are a champion for women of fantasy football. You can get yourself a championship belt, trophy, ring. They have some cool wall art to decorate your office, hallways, kids' rooms, etc. trophysmack.com/WOFF, WOFF. Any and all commissions we make from this great partnership, we're using to help send women to a lot of these NFL events, i.e. the Super Bowl, NFL draft, the combine. So Christmas is coming up. The end of your fantasy champion or fantasy leagues are coming up. All this stuff is a great way to, again, help women grow in sports. trophysmack.com/WOFF, WOFF. All right, Austin, let's get into the picks. Our first category, Captain Chalk. Of course, this is the Chalk Captain of the week. Everyone's going to be picking them because they are just that damn good. And Austin, it's kind of hard to ignore what many are feeling is the MVP frontrunner, and that is Lamar Jackson, who I'm guessing is the highest priced captain on this slate.
Yes, definitely the highest priced, and also just definitely the MVP frontrunner. He is 17.1K on DraftKings in the captain spot. Really expensive. If you're playing cash, if you're playing small field stuff, sure, do it. And honestly, you could probably do it in larger field stuff because there is actually a really great chance that he becomes the highest scoring player on the slate. We've seen Lamar Jackson go off for 40 points. If he does that, it doesn't matter what other players do. He will likely be the optimal captain. So I think it's totally fair to play him regardless of the contest type. I will be diversifying elsewhere as well to get leverage on people that are playing Lamar Jackson in the captain spot. He'll probably be 20% rostered. And honestly, I don't see a clear pathway for it to fail. The Ravens have the highest implied team total on the slate at 29 points. That's a lot of points to score. That's one of the higher ends of the implied total spectrum. That's 4 touchdowns. Lamar Jackson could score or all 4. He could probably do it on the ground. even. So I see very few pathways for him to fail as a captain, but we have some other options for some more upside and ways to get really different.
I like it. Lamar's been on a tear. I mean, shit, what he did in week 9, just from a fantasy perspective, and did it with only 4 rushing yards. Like, he's gonna tear up the Bengals. So it's well worth the price. But in the event that you don't want to pay up for Lamar Jackson, our next category here, the Mutineer, these are going to be your contrarian captain choices that offer some variety and upside in some of your larger tournaments. And you know what? Let's just stay with the Baltimore Ravens because this offense is high flying right now. Let's talk about the man that might end up rushing for over 2,000 yards this year, already with 1,009 games. That would be Derrick Henry.
Yes, I'm very interested in playing Derrick Henry. I will have a lineup with him. This is one of the cases where I will probably play 2 or 3 lineups, and one of them will have Derrick Henry as my captain, because I think in particular, he's the second most expensive player on the slate. That's at 16.8K. He is also, when you go to the app, there's this red number 9 next to his name that makes it seem like the Bengals are really, really good at defending the run. Their schedule has not been against what I would call good teams. Like let's talk about some of the teams that they have had to face. There's the Patriots, the Chiefs. Okay, that's a good running team. The Commanders, they're so earlier in the year. They're hot now. They've really caught their stride. But week 3, they were still kind of figuring it out. The Carolina Panthers. Oh, by the way, they gave up 175 rushing yards to the Baltimore Ravens, and then the past 4 weeks they played the New York Giants, the Cleveland Browns, led by Deshaun Watson, the Philadelphia Eagles, who did run all over them, and then the Vegas Raiders. I think that this is about a strength of schedule thing. I think that red number 9 is overblown. And I think the best example for it is what the Eagles did to them 2 weeks ago. 161 rushing yards between their running backs and Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts had 3 tush-push touchdowns from the 1-yard line in that game. The Baltimore Ravens do not do the tush-push. They will run it with Derrick Henry. So really reasonably, you could see Derrick Henry with 3 or more scores in this game. And Josh mentioned it's at a 53-point total. I'm betting the under because if you blindly bet the unders on 50-point plus totals, you will come out positive, historically speaking, over the past 5 years. And if I'm betting on this game to hit the under, I'm betting on the receivers to not quite get there, and maybe the running back does. Also, they're favored by 6 points. They'll be ahead. Lots of reasons.
Yeah, I find it really interesting because, you know, we like to talk when it comes to strength of schedule and points against the certain positions. Very early in the season, Cincinnati was terrible against the run. They got back a couple of their key run defenders. Sheldon Rankins, not DJ Reader, BJ Hill, I believe.
Yeah.
Since week 6, via DraftKings scoring, Cincinnati is only allowing the 7th fewest fantasy points to the running back position. Now, of course, everything that you said holds weight. I mean, anytime you have a running back with a quarterback who is a threat as a runner, a lot of these metrics go right out the window. So, but on the flip side to that, maybe it might be interesting to flip a little bit and go towards that passing game. And your next contrarian captain, Zay Flowers, has been on a tear. I think 4 of his last 5 games, he's had over 100 receiving yards.
Yeah, and I really like Zay Flowers this year just because of the volume that he's getting, the role he has in this offense, and it is a really good matchup. So to me, if you're betting on this game to push towards its over and to really be a shootout, you should bet on Zay Flowers to carry the weight as the highest scoring player because it'll be contrarian. I think people are going to want to play the quarterbacks. Joe Burrow has been playing really well lately. People want to play him. People are going to want to play Jamar Chase, which I think is a fine move given that Baltimore also struggles against the pass. But I like Zay Flowers because I think he will probably be the 5th highest rostered captain on this slate. And when they played Cincinnati earlier this season, he went for 7 catches and 111 yards. So he's getting the 100-yard bonus. He did not score a touchdown, though. This is the issue that we've had with Zay Flowers. So if you're betting on what you're betting on is you're saying, okay, Zay Flowers does it again. He gets that 100-yard bonus and he scores a touchdown or two. I think it's a reasonable bet, especially if you buy into this game being back and forth and there being a lot of passing. I think Zay Flowers is going to remain the key to the Ravens pass game.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'm really curious to see how much they work Deontay Johnson in now that he's had one game. You know, obviously we know that Deontay Johnson commands targets. Maybe that creates more opportunities for Zay Flowers in some of these one-on-one matchups. And let's be honest, the Bengals secondary hasn't been good either. So
no, and their pass rush wasn't good. And like I said this for DFS Academy last week that the Bengals pass rush is bad. Well, then the Raiders had their like backup left tackle in the game to the point that if that person got injured, there was going to be a tight end or a defensive lineman come in. So that threw out everything out the window about the pass rush game for the Bengals. I don't think they're going to be able to do to the Ravens what they just did to the Raiders. So I would not take that one game sample size too heavily.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Raiders, Ravens. I mean, come on. All right, our next category is going to be the first mate because every captain needs a reliable crew. These are going to be the standouts that help maximize your lineups via the flex spots. You know what? We've done a lot of talking about Ravens players. Let's give the Bengals a little love and be like, hey, you know what? You can actually get some points from these Bengals players. And let's start with their superstar wide receiver, Mr. Ja'Marr Chase.
Yeah, I will say I'm a notorious Bengals hater, but I do think that the Bengals, they will have players that score points for sure in this game. I definitely want to have exposure to them. This isn't like there's sometimes where I will say I want 5 players from one team in my lineup and just bet that they absolutely dominate. I'm not doing that this week. I'm going to do a 4-2 build. I don't do 3-3s because that is just harder to get different that way. It's easier to get different if you're doing 4-2 builds. So Ja'Marr Chase, he's 10.8K just in the flex spot. So if you have him in your captain spot, he's more expensive than that. But he's the best and healthiest Bengals pass catcher right now. Like that's really all it is. There's no T Higgins, and the usage behind Ja'Marr Chase is not that great. Like there's not a ton of guys that are really killing it behind him. He by far leads this team in targets. He has 70 targets. The next most is T Higgins at 45. Behind him is Mike Gesicki at 36 targets. So he is twice as many targets as anybody else that is going to be active in this game. He's obviously the person that Joe Burrow relies on the most, and he's going to need to rely on him in this game. So what I'm betting on is really just a volume game happening from Ja'Marr Chase where he gets 10 catches, 100 yards, and a touchdown. And if so, like he at that point, like he will definitely be pushing for captain. I'm betting on the Bengals players to push more, or the Ravens players to push more and to be in that optimal captain spot. But Ja'Marr Chase, he's going to probably be 60-70% rostered anyways. And so you probably want to be in on that, except for maybe in really large field stuff. Then maybe you bet on him failing. But to me, it's hard to see a pathway where Chase just doesn't get the volume and isn't a part of an optimal or near optimal DFS lineup.
Here's what I find really interesting. Joe Burrow threw 5 touchdown passes last week. Not a single one went to Ja'Marr Chase. How many people are going to be turned off of Ja'Marr Chase simply because of that? So if you do ultimately end up deciding to throw him in a captain spot, the rostership may not be as high just simply because that game is so fresh in people's minds. I don't know. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I do. I agree with that. I expect him. I think it's going to be close between him and Derrick Henry of who is the third most rostered captain in this matchup. I think it's going to be clearly Lamar at the top, then Joe Burrow. And then I think it'll be one of the two of them. I think they'll both be pushing around 10%. And then Zay Flowers will fall in underneath that.
Okay. So let's, again, go right back to the Ravens because we love this offense so much. Tight end has been really disappointing this season, but you know what? With Isaiah likely ruled out, maybe there's a chance that we get classic Mark Andrews and things start to pop a little bit for the Ravens offense with Andrews involved.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm going to go as far as to say classic Mark Andrews, but I do think.
Look, I'm trying to be optimistic, damn it.
I do think we'll get a good Mark Andrews. The Bengals have been bad against tight ends since week 6. Is that correct? Let me just double check. Yes, since week 6, they have allowed the 5th most fantasy points in DraftKings scoring to the tight end position. So great matchup for Mark Andrews. As you said, there's no Isaiah Likely. That's really the key here. Like Charlie Kolar, he might get a couple touches. Like if you don't play Mike Evans, I think it's worth playing Charlie Kolar. He had 3 catches and a touchdown the last time that the Ravens played the Bengals. I think it's fair. But I am going for Mark Andrews, not just because I think that he'll get some usage, but he gets the end zone usage. He's been getting targeted for touchdowns. That's what I like about Mark Andrews. He hasn't been getting as much volume over the recent weeks, but he is someone that Lamar Jackson is looking for when he's going to score a touchdown. So I definitely want to have him. And I think if you have Lamar Jackson as your captain, putting Mark Andrews in your flex spot is really smart, because then like maybe he throws 1 touchdown to Zay Flowers, he throws 1 to Mark Andrews, and who knows, maybe Justice Hill gets a receiving touchdown. Like that's the type of thing that could happen. And that's one way that Lamar would be the optimal captain. And because he just spreads it around so much that one of his pass catchers doesn't become optimal.
Oh, I think it makes perfect sense. All right, let's switch gears. Let's go over to the deck scrubbers. These are going to be your cheaper punt plays that can make a lineup based on 1 play, limited opportunity. Let's stay on the Ravens train. You know, Nelson Aguilar is kind of somebody that seems to always find a way, and Lamar Jackson seems to rely on him when, I don't know, nobody else in his career has ever found a reason to rely on Nelson Aguilar. But hey, you know what? It's working for Lamar and the Ravens.
Yeah, it is. And this is also just a salary consideration. Like there's a lot of really top end players that you're going to want in your lineup, like Lamar, Derrick Henry, Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, Zay Flowers are all pretty expensive. And then there's kind of a gap of players that are like really reliable and going to be getting consistent volume. I think there's an advantage there because you can place a bet on what random player you think is going to play a role in this game and be featured. Like Deontay Johnson is an interesting guy to throw out there because he laid a goose egg last week, but another week with the offense maybe playing a bigger role. But I like Nelson Aguilar because of what you said, Josh. Like Lamar Jackson looks for him. It's one of his reliable pass catchers, and when he's in a pitch, I feel like at least once a game, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, Nelson Aguilar's on the field. Oh, he's catching the ball, and like half the time it's for a touchdown. So that's really what I'm betting on here. This is a player I will pick if I'm betting on this game to push close to the over. Too, because I think that's when Aguilar becomes more involved. If I'm creating a Derrick Henry build, I'm probably not going to play him because I'm going to be betting on the under. I'll probably have Justin Tucker in my lineup. So it does depend a little bit on how I'm building my lineup and predicting this game to go. But I do like Nelson Aguilar as a salary saving option.
I just want to say the words reliable and Nelson Aguilar have never been used in the same sentence before today. So Austin, thank you for setting precedent. But not really, because I'm not a Nelson Aguilar fan, hence the Eagles hat. Anyway, let's flip back to the Bengals side here. This was the tight end that I wasn't expecting you to talk about when it comes to the Bengals, especially after Mike Gesicki scored 2 touchdowns last week. But tell us why you like Drew Sample as an option, as a lower priced punt play.
Because he's a lower priced punt play. I like saving money when I'm doing this. No, he also he had 4 catches on 4 targets last week. They weren't like down the field threats. He had 14 yards, but he scored a touchdown. So he showed that he was being used. He was one of the pass catchers that benefited from the absence of T. Higgins. And I think it's going to be hard to honestly predict who plays that secondary pass catcher role in this team, because Joe Burrow is throwing the ball around and sharing the load a lot with his pass catchers. So I think that's going to be one of the challenges and tricks to this game is picking the right pass catcher. I'm going to go with Drew Sample because I don't trust Mike Gesicki. I think he was a smash play last week, given the matchup, but the Ravens have been better against tight ends than the Vegas Raiders have. Again, Raiders down here. And I think touchdowns are hard to predict. And so, yeah, Mike Gesicki got 2 touchdowns last week. He's not really known for being a touchdown guy in my mind. He's known for being a high-speed guy that can't catch balls. And so I'm going to bet on the touchdown variance going elsewhere with someone like Drew Sample.
Here's the biggest thing, I think, when you're looking at Gesicki versus Sample in this field, right? Per DraftKings scoring, since week 6, the Ravens have allowed the most fantasy points to wide receivers, right? To tight ends, they're in the bottom half of scoring allowed, only about on average 5 for 60. So we know the discrepancies here. When T. Higgins doesn't play, Mike Gesicki's target share is upwards of 20%. He's quite used in this offense, but he's never been a traditional inline tight end. So if the Bengals are using him more out wide, spread out, etc., maybe running that 12 personnel where you're bringing Sample in, Gesicki's treated more like a wide receiver, and that scoring tends to favor him. So that's what I find really interesting between these two.
I think it's a really fair way to look at it. I think it's definitely fine to have Gesicki in your lineup. Like, I'm not considering him as a trap play this week. His salary is a little bit more expensive for the way I'm building my lineup. So it's hard to get to him. And I think people are going to be on him. And so if you're in a large field, it might not be the best way to get different. But I think he's a totally fine play in smaller field stuff. I also, though, would say Andre Yoshabas has a similar role as Mike Gesicki, and so who's to say he isn't the guy that kind of sticks out?
A little less volume, though.
Yes, less volume traditionally, but they got to get the ball to someone, and it's not going to be Jermaine Burton.
It's called foreshadowing, people. Once again, friendly reminder, hit the link in our description. You can play these Thursday night showdown slates against us here at Club Fantasy. Try to come take our money. Sometimes we win. You know what? More often than not, you guys win. Because it just happens that way, right? We try to get different and have a little bit of fun and try different things. This is how we do things, right? So come play against us. But let's talk about my favorite segment. This is the Kraken. These are the lineup traps that sink the ship. And Austin, you threw it up. You teed me up. Let's throw some water on Jermaine Burton here.
Well, I don't even think we have to throw water on him. I think we just need to keep throwing water on him because he's throwing enough water on himself at this point, showing up at casinos and whatnot, and in his team gear. I mean, they drafted him to be the guy, right? They drafted him in the 3rd round. They drafted him, which some people have said, like, Jermaine Burton could have been a 1st-round draft pick if it weren't for the character concerns around him and showing up to practice on time and paying attention. And unfortunately, that's proven to be true at the NFL level too. Like, I really honestly was excited about him as a prospect, and I think he could do really well in this offense. They planned on him being a big part of the game plan last week, but then he was late scratched. And so some of it is just like, he may not play. And even if he's active, there's no telling what role he's going to have because he's got to build trust with this offense, and he hasn't had the opportunities to do it in games that matter. So I am just avoiding it altogether this week because I don't know what Jermaine Burton I'm going to get. I don't like that that's the analysis, but that's just the case here.
I think it makes perfect sense. I mean, a lot of us had high hopes for Jermaine Burton coming into this season, somebody that could potentially fill that wide receiver 3 role that was vacated by Tyler Boyd. The concerns that were coming out was kid can't keep his head on straight. We're starting to see it here in the NFL. So, but let's flip the script a little bit. Somebody on the Ravens that you're not as high on, and they're about as dirt cheap as you can get. The big man, the fullback, Patrick Ricard. Why are you hating, dog?
Well, you may, because you don't get fantasy points for blocking is really the big thing.
This man scored a touchdown last week.
That's why he's a trap now. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I think there's going to be a temptation to fit in a bunch of the expensive players on this slate. And then you look at it like, oh, Patrick Ricard. I hear his name every time I watch the Ravens play. Yeah, he's gotten 2 targets this season. All season. One of them went for a touchdown. Cool. But only 2 targets. He's primarily there to block. And every now and then they reward him for his hard work. I wouldn't bet on it. I would do something different elsewhere. I just don't fall for it. I'm sure he'll be like 1% rostered. And that's why I bring this up. He might be like, well, nobody's playing Patrick Ricard. Somebody's playing Patrick Ricard, and they need to know that they're burning their money.
It's $400, man. I usually leave that much on my bench when I'm filling out these showdowns. It's fine.
Oh, but you want to leave money on the bench. You want to leave that room. That's how you know you're getting different, because people don't want to do that. They want to maximize their salaries. So then you you leave like $1,000 and people are like, ooh, I'm afraid to do that.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. This has been our Thursday night football preview. Once again, friendly reminder, check out our sister site, Women in Fantasy Football's partnership with Trophy Smack. Head over to trophysmack.com/WOFF, WOFF. Get all of your achievement-based needs, trophies, belts, rings, wall smack, you name it. Trophy Smack's got it. Get the stuff for the holidays, for the end of your fantasy season. It is all there for the taking, and show some love and support women in sports. All right. This has been Oh Captain, My Captain, your Thursday night football DFS showdown slate preview. He is Austin Amandolia at Austin_FFL. I am Joshua Hudson at the One Hudsonian. You can, of course, follow Women in Fantasy Football at women_FF. You can also follow Club Fantasy at Club Fantasy FFL, the URL, clubfantasyffl.com. Until next Thursday, we are out. Thank you all.